Hello, and welcome to the Created Mind podcast, where we discuss psychology and its influence on culture from a Christian perspective. My name is Ashley Hagman, therapist and adjunct professor of psychology, and today we're starting in on our third installment of the Body, Mind, Soul series that I've been doing. My goal in this series is to develop a really strong, theologically grounded understanding of mental health, mental illness, that includes the whole person, that includes humanity the way that we were created by God in His image. Today, I would like to talk about somatic therapy. This is a form of therapy that has gained in popularity in recent years. Dare I say, even gone viral lately. I'd like to engage this from a Christian clinician's perspective on what's going on here, because I'm finding a lot just out on my timeline in the ether that the algorithm is bringing me that's wholehearted. Like, yes, somatic therapy, this is great. And there's these incredible videos. I recently saw one where Leanne Rimes, she's going through something called a jaw release. There's a clinician who's putting, I don't believe he's a mental health professional. I think he's more probably chiropractor or something like that. But he is putting his hands inside her mouth and outside her mouth and doing like a jaw release. And she's having this incredible emotional response. It seems like she's releasing all of this tension, all of this trauma that she has held for years. And it's a really powerful clip. I think that paired with our growing awareness of trauma and the way that it shows up in our bodies and the way that our bodies respond to trauma is making this soup of somatic therapy really hitting a need and really getting at something that people need, that people are longing for, are interested in to pursue healing. On the other spectrum, there are a lot of Christians out there who are rightly suspicious of some of these ideas. Some of them in particular sound really Eastern. As Western Christians, we are suspicious of things that are too body oriented. That comes a little bit from our ancestry of perhaps some Gnosticism, perhaps some Greek philosophy seeping into our conceptualizations of the way that we understand the human. We're naturally suspicious of this. There's some right suspicion that we need to explore, but I also think that it is useful. My thesis statement for what I'm going to talk through in this podcast is that these techniques do work. That's not contested. That we can see in the science. I'm going to present why that's true. How it works, how they're saying that it works, is sometimes correct. Sometimes they're talking about real, true things, and sometimes it's not so correct and not so grounded. And why it works is often incorrect in these. I would like to explore some different popular theories in our culture, and offer a thoughtful critique that's based on theology. And in that vein, I'd like to let's first get into the theology. There are a few ideas that I think we need to keep at the forefront of our mind, that we need to be grounded in when we're evaluating the ideas of somatic therapy. The first one is that all life, all energy, all everything, all matter is sourced in God. That is very clear. Everything that exists in this world is completely contingent on Him, on His existence. He is the one that created, and He is the sustainer. He continues to be an integral part of His creation, and He is the one that originated it. However, it's important that this source of energy, this source of life, this source of all things is a person. And it's not this impersonal cosmic force in the universe. It is a person who has a being. And as a being, we relate to him as a person. And as a being, he has demands, he has laws, he has given us the way to understand the universe and the way to understand creation in his word. Whatever he has said about the way that he has created this universe, about the way that he has structured our bodies and the quote energy and all of those things is true. We need to be grounded in the authoritative word of Scripture and let that guide and inform the way that we understand our bodies. We also need to understand that we are not identical to God or part of God. We are the image of God. He has made us like Him, And there's different ways that that can be thought of how that works. But we are not identical to God. It's not this pantheistic idea of join God and his energy and become part of him. There's not sort of this one thing in the universe that the more that we use our bodies in the right way, the more we can have unity with God. Now, there is the concept of unity with God, but that is not a sameness. We are not the same as God. We need to have that distinction forefront in our minds as we continue in this discussion. Secondly, our bodies were made by an intelligent creator, and this should inspire worship and curiosity. Instead of fear, instead of reservations, instead of blocking it out, we need to be pursuing our knowledge of our bodies and the way that God has created us and the interplay between our minds and our souls and our bodies. That should inspire curiosity instead of fear, because we give too much to these other philosophies by being so afraid to look at these ideas that we totally block everything out when it comes to this interaction. We're letting them have something that is the Lord's. The Lord created this. It's ours. It is the Christian's place. It is the Christian's purview. It is the Christian's authority to be able to look at these things and discover, and it should inspire curiosity and it should inspire worship. That being said, again, we need to be grounded in the truth. We need to submit all things to the source of truth, which is God, and the way that he's revealed himself to us in his word. Secondly, we need to have this conceptualization of common grace and general revelation. There are things which the Bible doesn't say. The scripture does not talk specifically about neurons and the way our nervous system interacts with our muscle tissue and our motor skills and things like that. It is not a science textbook. It is not a therapy manual. It is theologically first. It is there to reveal to us something about God. And that has a lot to say about everything else, because we are all contingent on him and it is all originated by God and created by God. What scripture has to say is absolutely authoritative, but there are things that it doesn't say. And for those things, we are tasked. What is the first task that God gave humanity in the garden? Was to observe creation and to label it. Adam goes and he names the animals. That is observing creation. That is using our faculties to understand the way God created in the world and to distinguish this thing is not this thing and this thing is not this thing. And these are the properties that this thing has. And let's identify that. And that was our mission that we were given before the fall. How much more now do we need that mission to observe creation and to learn from it and to be able to see these vestiges of the way that God created us, even though they are broken by sin. And that's my next point, is that sin has affected the systems of our bodies and the way our minds work. The main example that we're going to see a lot, specifically in this form of therapy, is that our fight or flight systems are a problem. Our threat assessments become a problem. They're broken. This is not the way that we were supposed to live in the world. Things are not working correctly, but we can still see the beauty of God's original design and the way he made our bodies and minds to function in such incredible complexity. Again, it needs to inspire worship in us, and we should want to learn more, because this is an act of worship and of pursuing God and the way that he has revealed himself to us through general revelation. In Romans 1, it talks about how God's invisible qualities are visible in his creation, how his eternal power and divine nature can be clearly seen and understood through creation. That is our bent, that is our end, that is what we should be pursuing when we are considering this therapy. And finally, we need to affirm the importance of the body along with the mind and the soul. We have a Christ who was not resurrected as a spirit. He did not stay as a spirit. He was bodily resurrected, and that matters. He promised us bodily resurrection. He promises us a physical new kingdom, along with spiritual renewal, along with cognitive renewal, mind renewal, and that matters. So these are the theological groundings, the things that we need to keep in our minds, fresh first in our minds, as we assess the rest of what I'm going to be talking about. Now that we have our theological grounding, in what is true according to Scripture. Next, I'd like to ground us in the science of what is going on in our bodies that is going to inform how we evaluate somatic therapies as we move forward in this podcast. Mainly, I'd like to talk about the autonomic nervous system and its role in trauma and in stressful experiences that we have. So the autonomic nervous system, underneath that, there's two systems. One is your parasympathetic nervous system. This system is your rest and digest. When this system is activated, you may feel even tired, but this is all about rest and restore. Your gut is more active. You're digesting what you need to digest. You're able to sleep deeply. You're able to wake up feeling more refreshed, and your body is repairing. It's working on things. The other system, the sympathetic nervous system, that's your fight or flight system. When that is activated, your body is dialed into what I need to immediately survive something that is threatening me right now. So if there is an animal that is running after you, your body is not focused on digesting food. Your body is not focused on getting good rest. Your body is ready to go. This is a beautiful way that God designed us to work. And it's really helpful. So all the energy, all the blood gets pumped to your muscles, your heart rate goes up, you're ready to go. You're ready to spring into action. You're hyper aware of what's going on around you. It's not as much a focus mode. It's more of that awareness of everything that's going on around you. You're feeling hyper aware of everything. And normally in a healthy person, healthy body, you have rhythms of these things and you go in and out throughout the day. When you wake up in the morning, your sympathetic nervous system starts to come on in a low mode. That's what helps you interact during the day. That's what gives you energy for what you need to do. That's what gives you your awareness of what's going on. And even throughout the day, you have fluctuations. So a lot of people after lunch feel a little bit tired. They feel sleepy. They're digesting. That's your parasympathetic nervous system coming on board. That's bringing things down. That's helping you digest your food. That's getting you ready for the next part of the day. And then eventually at night, you begin to really wind down and things become sluggish. Your body is recovering. It's resting. If you think of some waves, these are gentle waves in a healthy person, gentle waves throughout the day. Some days you might have more stressors, and so you might have more of that sympathetic nervous system online to help you deal with those things. Some days it's a sleepy Saturday and you have nothing to do, and so your body's just like, yeah, let's take it easy. And that's good. You need those fluctuations throughout each day, throughout each week. Those are natural, those are good, those are healthy. What happens though, what can happen, especially if someone has experienced trauma, their brain feels perpetually in a state of threat. So your body stays in that sympathetic nervous system to an extreme. So the wave is real high because your heart rate is out of this world. Your muscles are tensed. You're hyper aware. You're unable to focus because everything around you is distracting you because your brain thinks you're under stress. Like your brain thinks you're about to be, eaten by a lion. So you are ready to go at all times. Your brain has interpreted, I am not safe. That is sort of a deep thing that your brain has learned is I am not safe. Your body is constantly ready. Now, the body cannot operate that way you only have so much energy. You only have so many reserves, right? You can't stay at that heightened level for too long. What happens is whether or not you want it, boom, your parasympathetic nervous system has to come on board and then you're crashing. And that's when you're feeling dead. And this is why anxiety and depression are often two sides of the same coin. You're operating with anxiety at this heightened level of arousal. Your body can't take that for very long. Maybe you've been operating on that more or less for months, for years. All of a sudden your body's going to give up and give out because you can't sustain that. Your body has to be able to digest, to absorb nutrients, or you will die. Whether or not you want it to, parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, and then it goes to a deep, deep low, and it really slows down. And that's when a lot of times you're holding on to fat a lot longer because your body thinks I'm in starvation mode. Your cortisol levels are really high. So that's signaling to your body, I am in an impending doom of starvation. I need to hold on to every calorie that I can. You're not going to feel energetic. Your body is saying, no, I need to slow down. I need to conserve my energy for the next time. That's when you get your really high and your really low lows. And that's a problem. Now, on the treatment side, there's a few different ways that you can go about retraining your mind to have a more healthy flow, smaller fluctuations in your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. One of those ways is cognitive therapy. That is where you're training your brain to think about what's going on in your life and to relearn what constitutes danger and what constitutes safety. So if you've been through a traumatic event, your brain might be, I think everything is dangerous, and it's picking up on all these triggers because it thinks it's in immediate danger. The cognitive side of things tries to think through logically, and the more you practice that, the more you think, your brain begins to learn, I'm actually not in immediate danger. And you're taking out your old memories and you're looking at them and you're interpreting them so that you can have a better idea of what's actually dangerous and what's not dangerous. So when you put it back away, you store it in your mind, your deep brain, your instinct brain responds better to those things that are happening. Another way that you can go about this is more mechanically, and that's where the somatic therapy comes in. So if you're working with the body, and a lot of times there is a cognitive component to it. So for example, you're bringing to mind the traumatic event, but if at the same time that you're bringing about the memories of this traumatic event, if at the same time you are doing something that mechanically relaxes the body, for example, deep breathing exercises, yoga, massage, things like that, that are mechanically relaxing your body, your brain is taking that feedback of, oh, hey, this thing seemed dangerous to me, but my body's relaxed. That must mean it's not dangerous. It's training your brain that actually I'm okay. I have control of this situation. I'm all right. So it's two ways of working on the same thing and doing the same thing. There's a lot of different ways that this is described that I don't think are true and I don't think are helpful. I think the best way to understand what somatic therapy is doing is learning. It's learning. It's your brain making associations between what is safe and what is not safe and being able to understand things accurately and to be able to purposefully calm yourself down in those times when you need to, while still retaining a sense of what is actually dangerous and having still that self-protective mechanism. Being in that healthy place, that's the goal of therapy, and it's done through learning. Now, a lot of theories frame it in a different way that I think is pseudoscience. Let me be completely frank about that one. And we're going to get into that in our second episode. This episode, we're mostly just going to be talking about some historical perspectives, how this field came about, how we started to investigate this, where it came from. And that's important because some of the criticisms of that field come about from a false understanding of where it came from. Our second episode is going through the modern theories of how we think currently somatic therapy works. And I'm going to talk about what they get right and what I think they get wrong. And we're going to talk about practically what you can do to discern between those things if you are thinking about going to a therapist. Next, I want to go through the history of somatic therapy. One of the biggest criticisms of somatic therapy is that it's Eastern in origin. Something that I was very surprised to learn when researching this is that actually a lot of the ideas that we have today about somatic therapy were not Eastern in origin. They were actually very Western in origin, but the ideas are very similar. It's interesting to see there's nothing new under the sun. There are all sorts of ways that we misunderstand, and there's all sorts of lies that come up organically in different parts of the world, completely independent of each other, and yet are still false. We are going to explore a little bit more of that as we go through our history here. The first person in history to have a really strong sense of the body and its relationship to the mind or even the spirit was a man named Wilhelm Reich. He was a student of Freud, so he was relatively early in the history of psychology. He had the idea of orgone energy. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't think anyone's going to be offended if I don't. But it was very similar to the idea of chi or prana or some of these other life force energies from Eastern philosophy. It was this energy that ran through your body. It would pulse back and forth and radiate inward and outward. And he had the idea that when a person is healthy, this energy flows from head to toe in a very organic, nice way, and that there are no blockages. However, when things are not working well, there are 7 rings that run perpendicular to your spine, 7 sections of your body from top to bottom. And these are places where energy can be blocked, it can get stuck. And this was called muscular armor. So if you think of different parts of your armor throughout your body, and the energy can get stuck there. And the idea is that you're trying to protect yourself, but it gets stuck and you're not able to function healthfully. And he said these are altogether independent of anatomical processes. So he is ungrounding this from the way our bodies are physically constructed, but it is sort of this very almost spiritual idea of energy going through. This energy originates in the pelvis/abdomen and it radiates and pulses outwards. His model proposed 4 stages of energy flow and the way it interacts in the body. The first stage is the buildup. You have mechanical tension. So that means like your body and your muscles hold tension. Then you have bioelectric charge. Things are charging up in this sort of energy conceptualization. And then you have a discharge of that energy. And then there's mechanical relaxation. So your muscles relax. So that is the normal progression of the way things should go. The way your energy should pulse from head to toe should be mechanical tension, charging, discharge, and mechanical relaxation. The foundation to this, and the reason why he developed this idea, was orgasms. He observed what's happening during sex as something that he felt was central to the way that our bodies work. Again, mechanical tension, muscle tension, your bioelectric energy charging, bioelectric discharge, which is that initial feeling, internal feeling of climax, and then mechanical relaxation, body relaxation. Yeah, unsurprisingly, he was a student of Freud. So I think it's pretty clear where this came from. So that's our first introduction into this back and forth relationship between the body and the mind, and a really strong conceptualization of how the body works in relation to cognitive things. Now, again, this sounds ridiculous to our modern ears, and perhaps not for people who are more interested in the Eastern side of things, but these ideas are showing up today. The core of some of these ideas, the idea that there is energy that can be stuck in the body, is we're going to see very modern. That is coming up right now. That is the big idea that's out there. And I don't think that's correct. I think that is a problem. We don't see that happening in science. There's some truth to this, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. But there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what's happening and why. Secondly, so we had Reich, and now the next person in history. There were other theorists between Reich and who I'm going to talk about next, but I don't have time for them. Very interesting if you want to dive into the history of somatic therapy. But I think for the purposes of our discussion today, the next important person to talk about is Thomas Hanna in the 70s. He's the person who coined the term somatics. Anytime you hear the word somatic, that was Thomas Hanna, and it refers to our body and the interplay between our mind and our bodies and the way our brain communicates to our body. He developed exercises for reducing muscle tension. The first thing that he studied, he was a neuroscientist, and the first thing that he studied was pandiculation, which is the brain sending out this biofeedback signal. So it sends out a signal through all your nerves to wake up your neuromotor system. In the morning, when you wake up, your first instinct, especially, we see this in babies, is to stretch, is to push your muscles out. It is your brain sending out this signal to your body. Wake up and let's test this out. Let's see if things are responding well. Let's see if the signal goes out and comes back and things are working well. And then throughout the day, the way that your body should healthfully work is you're using that system The impulses are traveling with great frequency to all parts of your body. That keeps things flowing. That primes the pump. It keeps a really good communication between your mind and your body. However, the way that our lives are now, with sedentary and repetitive movement, very common in our culture, muscle tension builds. Your muscles aren't loose, and you get that sense when you're sitting there in your office chair for a while. Obviously, your muscles get tense and you feel it's awful, or you're stuck in a car all day. Your mind and your body are just not able to communicate because it's just so still. Pandiculation, these stretches that he developed, these that he developed, wakes up your body and allows your brain and your body stronger connections, allowing those impulses travel from your brain to all different parts of your body to keep things moving and keep things going. His ideas developed completely independently of Eastern philosophy, but he did begin to engage Eastern philosophy in the course of his work throughout many years. He began to see how Eastern practices like yoga and Tai Chi were very similar to what he had discovered. They were grounded in neurobiology. One great quote from him that describes his thoughts on this really well is, quote, "The Eastern tradition, and particularly the complex science of yoga, has not only explored altered states of consciousness, but has devised effective techniques for bringing them about. And this is a massive tradition of 5,000 years of somatic science, which has never been entered into by Western science. Stripped of its mythological framework and clarified by the techniques of Western science, the Eastern yogic, meditational, and mystic tradition is an immense source of practical facts about the range of possibilities for human transformation that is possible for any of us." This quote highlights what is going on here is that if you think about how yoga developed, it was 5,000 years of experimentation, of people moving their bodies and seeing what happens. And of course, they have built a mythology around it. They have built a religion around it. That part is very dangerous to our faith. We need to enter into this discussion with gravity and with care so that we can discern what is truly happening, what is true in our bodies, what is the way that God has created our bodies to be, and how much of this is false religion, how much of this is idolatry, is mythology packaged up in pseudoscientific language. There we're seeing it in history as this tradition of somatic therapy developed independent of Eastern tradition, developed very Western in mindset. Wilhelm Reich and Thomas Hanna, neither of them really had ideological contact with a lot of Eastern ideas until Hanna had it later in his life. But when he was originally making his observations and forming his ideas, he was seeing something that was really there. He was seeing something that was happening and trying to understand it, trying to put language to why it works and how it works. And then he's finding in these Eastern practices that what they're doing is based on neurobiology, is based on the way that our bodies truly function. That's going to give us some insight into modern forms of somatic therapy where it is less spiritual, the way that it's packaged. There's still some aspects of that to it. But again, we need to discern and we need to parse out, okay, what is actually happening in our bodies versus what is an explanation that is not accurate, and how can we find out what the truth is and the way to heal our bodies and minds in a really effective way. On that note, we will have to stop there for this podcast. So join me in 2 weeks. Join me for the next one where we'll pick up where we left off, and we're going to be talking about modern somatic therapy and how it's showing up nowadays. How is this actually practiced now? How is this field developed? And what are the truths that are coming out of this field? And what things do we need to be careful of? And I'm also going to lay out at the end, practically, what are some steps that you can take to discern, hey, this is true and this is not true? What are a few questions that you can ask to help you get a better idea if what your therapist is telling you is true and good and helpful? And what are some red flags to discern what is helpful and what you should pursue as a Christian? If you like what you heard here and you want to join me in some conversation, I would really appreciate it. I mean, on the podcast, I'm just like talking to air. I'd really love to have conversations. Join me on Substack. The link is in the description. Interact with me there. That would make my day, to be completely honest, and have a conversation. Disagree with me, agree with me. That's great. It's all fun. So join me there. My link is in the description. You can subscribe and follow. I also put out some writings. I do little notes. I do longer posts. If you are interested in that, please subscribe and Substack as well. Praying for you guys, praying as you're thinking about somatic therapy, as you're seeing things like the Leanne Rimes video that's coming across your newsfeed, praying that the Holy Spirit would give you discernment, a clear sight of what is true and what is helpful, and perhaps some understandings of what is not true, what is pseudoscience, what is not helpful. I hope this was encouraging to you, and I'll see you guys next time.